They say the hardest distance to measure is the inch between just friends and something more. It's the kind of space that feels nostalgic, even when it's happening right in front of you. A yellowed photo frame, sunflowers blooming behind two kids who didn't know how to be awkward yet. Back then, there wasn't a name for it. Yuichi doesn't know exactly when he started doing it, but his eyes just drift. She's not the center of attention or the class idol, she's just there. Shoulder-length hair catching the light. It's a quiet habit that's become his new baseline. If he had to put a label on them now, the words feel too heavy to carry. Then the distance closes, and the air gets thin. Sumi stands there with a stack of papers, her voice polite and terrifyingly distant. She doesn't call him by his nickname anymore. She just looks at him with those soft eyes and says, "Momose-kun, here, the teacher asked me to give you this." It's a verbal barrier. Since middle school they've stopped walking together, stopped talking, and apparently started living in different worlds. High school was supposed to be a fresh start, but it just feels like a longer hallway. Yuichi stares at the back of her head, wondering exactly when they stopped using first names. He heads home, the silence of the house usually a relief until his family decides to detonate a social landmine. He's barely through the door when his mom drops the bomb like she's announcing the weather. "Sumi-chan's coming over today." Yuichi nearly chokes on his own heartbeat. His sister is practically vibrating in the background, but his brain is stuck on one word. Why? Apparently they've been talking at the supermarket, and now the girl he can barely look at in class is heading to his dining table. It's a bribe. A delicious, golden brown bribe. His mom beams, recalling how Sumi confessed she missed her cooking. "She told me she really loved my karage, so I invited her over to have some." While his sister is doing victory laps, Yuichi is spiraling. How is he supposed to survive dinner when he can't even survive a handout in homeroom? His mom leans in, that classic "I know exactly what I'm doing" smirk on her face. She doesn't hold back, pointing out the obvious that Yuichi has been trying to ignore. "Sumi-chan's gotten super cute, hasn't she?" He tries to play it cool, but the of course from his sister makes the air in the room feel 20 degrees hotter. He tries to rationalize it away. At school, she's just Fujino-san. Quiet, unassuming, almost invisible. She's not one of the girls the guys gossip about, but then Chihiro shouts about her arrival time, and the reality of Sumi coming back into his personal space hits him like a freight train. Total panic sets in. He's vacuuming, emptying the trash, and frantically hiding his racy manga, which are probably just slightly suggestive covers, but why take the risk? He stops, breathless, clutching a volume to his chest. Before I know it, I'm cleaning my room. He doesn't even know if she'll set foot in here, but the possibility is a nightmare he's currently scrubbing clean. Deep in the chaos he finds it, an old photo album, forgotten and thick with dust. He shouldn't look. He doesn't have time, but he flips a page anyway. The images are blurry, amateur snapshots of grade school days, but the feeling is crystal clear. He was happy, they were together, and suddenly the room feels much smaller. The pages are a blur of karage-stuffed cheeks and sunflower fields. In every shot, there she is, standing right next to him, laughing until her eyes disappear. They were always together, a two-person team fueled by his mother's cooking and endless energy. He stares at the photos, the paper cool under his thumb, realizing that Fujino-san used to be the person who filled his entire world. The memory hits him like the smell of frying oil, a mountain of juicy chicken, golden and perfect. Little Yuichi and Sumi, eyes practically glowing, shouting in unison. Yummy. He can still see her stuffing her face, cheeks bulging, ignoring his mother's gentle reminders to slow down. It was messy, it was loud, and it was perfect. She used to have this specific look, a literal beam of light in her eyes the second she took a bite. It was pure, unadulterated joy. Seeing her like that, Yuichi couldn't help but smile back, his own cheeks full of food. They didn't need words, they just needed another piece of chicken. The memories are a flood now, playing from morning to night, getting scolded for whispering under the covers instead of sleeping. They even had that ridiculous routine, nighty-night pose go. He can't help but let out a dry laugh. It was stupid, childish, and the most comfortable he's ever been in his life. Back then there was no gap to bridge. He was with her more than anyone else, their hands always within reach, their lives essentially the same story told from two different angles. It was simple. It was easy. He lies back on his bed, the weight of the memories heavy on his chest. Her childhood voice calling his nickname echoes in the silence. Yuuichi. It's a ghost of a sound, making the present reality feel that much colder. That takes me back, he mutters, but the nostalgia is starting to ache. To their parents, nothing has changed. They probably still see two kids holding hands in a field. But Yuichi knows better. Time doesn't just pass, it builds walls. He remembers taking baths together, sharing everything, and now the very thought makes his face burn. It feels weird because it is weird. He's haunted by that Momose-kun she delivered in class. A verbal boundary line drawn in permanent ink. He's sitting on his bed, head in his hands, trying to prepare for the inevitable shift. And then, the bell. A sharp electric jolt that snaps him back to the present. The front door is opening. She's here, looking just as polite and reserved as she does at school, clutching a gift bag of sweets. His sister is a blur of skmir and excitement, but Yuichi and Sumi are stuck in a vacuum. She bows her head slightly. Good evening. He tries to offer a greeting, a hand raised in a half-formed wave, but the silence between them is deafening, dead air. She looks up, and for a second, the school facade cracks. Her heartbeat is practically visible in the way she grips her bag. It's been so long since I've been here, I'm a bit nervous. It's the first real thing she's said to him all day. Yuichi can feel his own heart thudding in response, a rhythmic, panicky bump that fills the hallway. She takes a breath, eyes fixed on the floor. Would it be okay if I called you Yuuichi like I used to? The request hits him like a physical blow. She tries to backtrack, worried his mom might find the switch weird, but the damage is done. She still calls his mom Mama Yuuichi. The history is there, whether they use the names or not. He puts his hands behind his head, leaning back to hide the fact that he's shaking. I don't mind. That's probably better for Mom. It's a tactical retreat, a way to accept the intimacy while blaming it on someone else. She looks up, a small, genuine smile finally breaking through. Thanks. Then he decides to double down. So then, he says it. The name he's been keeping behind a glass wall for years. Sumi. I should probably call you that, right? The name feels electric in the air. A single word that wipes away the last 3 years of awkward silences and formal greetings. He can't even look her in the eye while he says it, but the weight of the name hangs between them, heavy and warm. She agrees. Her voice a soft okay that rings louder than a shout. But before they can actually process the shift, Chihiro explodes into the hallway. Sumi-chan, hurry up. She drags her away, leaving Yuichi standing there in the silence, his brain currently short-circuiting over the fact that they're back to first names. The dining table looks like a festival, a literal mountain of fried chicken sitting in the center of the room. Sumi looks like she's seen a miracle, her hands over her mouth. Yuichi tries to complain about the amount, but his mom isn't buying it. That's not what your face is saying. And she's right, everyone in the room is staring at the plate like it's a prize. They dig in. Dad's working late, so it's just them and the feast. The second the first bite lands, the noise returns. Yummy. The sister and Yuichi are in perfect sync, and for a split second, it's like the years apart never happened. His mom just watches them with a satisfied grin, soaking in the chaos. Then it happens. Sumi takes a bite and the beam returns. She's practically glowing, her eyes sparkling just like they did in the old photos. So tasty, she whispers. His mom is practically swooning over how cute she is, shoving more food her way. She looks exactly the same, exactly as happy as she was when they were kids. Yuichi can't help himself. A genuine, warm laugh escapes him before he can catch it. I just remembered you used to make that exact face while eating. It's the last wall coming down. Sumi blinks, her face flushing pink, while the rest of the table explodes in laughter. For the first time in years, the air in the room is light. Sumi looks around at the family, at the food, and at Yuichi. There's a softness in her voice that wasn't there at school. This is like we've gone back in time. I'm so happy. It's not just about the chicken, it's the atmosphere. It's the feeling of belonging that they both thought they'd lost. But dinner has to end. The plates are empty, and the clock is ticking toward evening. Sumi checks her watch, the school Fujino returning for a moment. I really should be heading home. Chihiro immediately goes into a meltdown, clinging to her like a limpet. No. Sumi-chan's leaving? It's chaotic and loud, but there's a lingering warmth in the air. His mom isn't letting her go that easily. You're welcome back again, anytime. Sumi's face lights up, her eyes wide. I'd love to learn to cook like Mama Yuuichi. It's more than an invitation, it's a permission slip to keep being part of their lives. Yuichi watches them, his chest tight with a feeling he can't quite name yet. Chihiro takes it a step further, her face inches from Sumi's. Come back all the time. The intensity is terrifying. Yuichi can only stand there, bewildered while his sister practically vibrates with need. But in the middle of the madness, Sumi just smiles, and for the first time, she doesn't look nervous at all. She looks right at them and makes a promise. Okay, I'll come back all the time. The words land with a heavy finality. Then his mom steps in with the final play of the night. Yuichi, it's dark out. Walk her home. He doesn't even argue. He just grabs his jacket and follows her out into the night. The night air is cool, the streetlights casting long, flickering shadows on the pavement. Yuichi apologizes for his sister's behavior, but Sumi just shakes her head. She likes the lively atmosphere. She likes being there. They walk in a rhythmic silence, the distance between them feeling different than it did in the classroom. Then, she stops. She turns to him, her cheeks flushed pink, a hand partially covering a smile that is both shy and incredibly bold. I got to talk to you again after such a long time. That made me happy. It's not about the food, or the family, or the nostalgia. It's about him. The air between them suddenly feels thick, charged with a truth that neither of them is ready to name, but both of them can finally feel. She's inside before he can even think of a response. It wasn't even a 5-minute walk, but it feels like he's traveled miles. He stands outside her gate, a quick night being all he could manage. As he walks back alone, the reality of what just happened starts to sink in. The first names, the conversation, it's all going back to how it used to be. But how it used to be feels completely different now. He stops, clutching his face as the heat returns with a vengeance. It shouldn't be different. It's just childhood friendship, right? Then the realization hits him like a punch to the gut. He was so nervous, so caught up in the moment that he didn't even use her first name back. The distance has shifted, the boundary is gone, and Momose Yuuichi is officially in over his head. A smartphone glow is the only light in the room, illuminating a search engine result that feels like a confession. Nostalgia. Yuichi is officially compromised, staring at the ceiling and replaying that smile until his brain shorts out. He was curious, sure, but looking up the definition of the feeling currently eating him alive feels like a tactical defeat. The 7:50 alarm doesn't just ring, it executes the last remnants of a restless night. Yuichi drags himself to the table, a walking ghost of a teenager, while his family is already at full throttle. Chihiro is a morning person by sheer force of will, chirping out greetings that his sleep-deprived brain can barely process. He's out the door with a sluggish wave, his mind still stuck on last night's conversation while his body goes through the motions of a school day. Back in the kitchen, the air turns to ice as Chihiro spots the disaster left on the counter. She hoists the lunch bag like a holy relic and delivers the tragic news. Oni-chan forgot his bento. The realization strikes him with the force of a physical blow in the middle of a quiet classroom. He's lunchless, and a desperate search of his pockets yields exactly 11 yen, not even enough for a pity snack from the vending machine. His friend is already circling like a shark, sensing the weakness. I guess I'll buy lunch, Yuichi mutters, but the coins in his hand tell a much darker story. I'm done for. His buddy is busy weaving a fantasy about a girlfriend hand delivering a lunch, a scenario so unlikely Yuichi just wants to sink into his desk. But then the impossible happens. A shadow falls over his desk and a familiar voice cuts through the noise. It's not a dream, it's a delivery. Fujino Sumi stands there, the school's quietest enigma, holding out the very bag he left on the counter. The entire room goes into a collective state of shock. Yuichi can only manage a strangled gasp. Fujino-san. She keeps her voice steady, explaining that his mom roped her into the delivery duty on her way to school. It's a perfectly logical explanation that feels like an absolute miracle. Before she leaves, she drops a bombshell for everyone listening. Oh, and let's trade rinds. The class collectively loses its mind while Yuichi stares at his screen, his heart doing jumping jacks. She leans in just a fraction, a soft reminder of the previous night's promise. After all, I did say I'd come to your place again. The words wash over him in a physical heatwave, turning his face a brilliant shade of crimson. Behind them, his friend is already processing the data with a look of pure, unadulterated suspicion. Nobody heard that, right? The encounter lasted less than a minute, but the sheer gravity of it feels like it could tilt the Earth's axis. He watches her walk back to her seat, his fingers ghosting over his phone. They are just childhood friends, but the time between them is starting to feel less like a gap and more like a bridge. He hides his face in his arms, wondering what this new, heavy feeling is supposed to be. Across the room, Sumi stares at her book, but the pages aren't turning. She's lost in the same quiet static as he is. He sneaks one more glance, catching her looking away just as his eyes find her. He grips the bento bag, a physical anchor to the past they're finally bringing into the present. He tells himself the same lie he's been using for years: we're childhood friends. The locker room is a battleground of etiquette. He stares at his phone, the send button looking like a detonator. Should he call her Sumi like the old days, or stick to the safe, sterile Fujino-san? He's the only one making it weird, but that realization doesn't make his thumb move any faster. He settles for a simple thanks and hopes for the best. He barely has time to pocket the phone before it buzzes. She replied instantly. It's a simple "you're welcome," followed by a question that reaches back a decade. Do you still like Kinpira-gobo? He stands frozen in the hallway, the question hitting him harder than any exam ever could. Why Kinpira-gobo? Her explanation is effortless and devastating. Because it was always in your bento when we were little. He stares at the screen, a small smile breaking through his confusion. He thought he was the only one who kept a record of those tiny, mundane details. Why does she remember? The memory floods back, two kids on a floor, sharing secrets over side dishes. She'd watch him eat with that same quiet intensity, and he'd claim his favorites with a pride only a child can feel. I thought I'd changed a lot, but... He watches her from the corner of his eye, seeing her stifle a giggle at her desk. He sends the final confirmation, a tiny piece of their shared history. There's some in there today too. He realizes that while everything else about them grew up, their taste for the old days stayed exactly the same. The sky decides to match his mood, opening up into a sudden downpour as he leaves school. He ducks into a park pavilion to wait it out, only to find he's not alone. Sumi is already there, a silent silhouette against the gray curtain of rain. She turns to him, her presence making the small shelter feel infinitely smaller. She is absolutely drenched, her hair clinging to her face, and her uniform translucent with rainwater. Yuichi panics at the sight of her, but she just offers a quiet, logical explanation for her state. I ran as fast as I could, but I'm not exactly fast. The sound of the rain on the roof fills the silence as they settle onto the bench. She remembers how he used to be a wild thing in the mud, never catching a cold no matter how hard it poured. Well, I am in high school now, he counters, feeling the vast distance of the years between that kid and the boy sitting next to her now. She gives a small, nostalgic laugh. Yeah, I did. But the warmth of the memory is instantly replaced by a cold, sharp panic. As she adjusts her position, Yuichi realizes the wet fabric of her shirt isn't hiding much of anything anymore. He jolts away, his eyes fixed on the rain as if the drops themselves could save him from his own vision. His brain is screaming in a loop, processing a color he was never meant to see today. It was white. It was definitely white. And now Momose Yuuichi is officially a hazard to himself. He tries to summon every drop of discipline he possesses. She's his childhood friend. She's like a sister. She's practically family. But his heart isn't listening to the family-friendly narrative. It's currently trying to exit through his ribcage. He tries to convince himself anyone would have that reaction, but the logic is as thin as her wet shirt. He buries his face in his hands, desperately trying to reset his internal settings. Sumi just looks on, confused by his sudden transformation into a statue of shame. But as the wind whistles through the pavilion, the heat of his embarrassment is cut by the sound of her teeth chattering. She's huddled over her bag, a small trembling figure against the storm. The reality of the situation finally overrides his panic. She's freezing. A series of tiny, high-pitched sneezes breaks the silence. She tries to insist she's fine, but the violent shaking of her shoulders says otherwise. You aren't okay. Yuichi shouts, his guilt finally winning out over his awkwardness. He pulls his gym tracksuit out of his bag, offering it like a peace treaty. He explains he was spacey this morning, which is why he has it even though they didn't have gym class. He remembers how she used to catch a cold every single time they played in the rain. Some things, apparently, never change. He looks away, his voice dropping to a low, honest hum as he explains why he stopped running into the rain years ago. It wasn't because he grew up or got smarter. He looks at his feet, the truth finally slipping out before he can stop it. Without Sumi, it just wasn't fun. The confession hangs in the damp air, heavier than the rain. Yuichi wants to vanish, his ears burning as he realizes exactly how much he just admitted. Sumi doesn't say anything. She just hides her face behind her bag, her eyes wide and shimmering with a response she can't find the words for yet. She takes the jacket with a quiet, breathy thank you. The tension is still there, but it's softer now. She asks him to stand guard while she changes, a request that sends another jolt through his system. "Roger?" he mutters, turning his back to the pavilion like a sentry at a palace. When she tells him it's okay to turn around, he's greeted by a sight that stops his breath. His gym jacket swallows her whole, the sleeves hanging past her fingertips and the hem nearly reaching her knees. She looks at him, her voice small and curious. "When did you get so big?" She steps closer, her shoes clicking on the stone. She's testing the distance, measuring the years in inches. She rises up on her tiptoes, trying to close the gap that biological growth has put between them. Even at full stretch, she's still looking up at him. The girl who used to be taller in grade school is now undeniably, irreversibly smaller. She looks into his eyes, a sad, sweet smile touching her lips as the reality of their changed bodies settles in. "But now I can't reach you even if I stand on tiptoes." The rain stops, and they begin the quiet walk home. The air is fresh, but the conversation is what truly clears the atmosphere. She finally returns his honesty with a confession of her own. "The days that we couldn't play together weren't any fun for me either." In that moment, the distance that has haunted them for years finally collapses. He's dizzy with the sheer magnitude of it all, wandering through the next day in a daze. But the school morning brings a predictable update from the teacher. Sumi is out with a cold. He sits at his desk, a small smile playing on his lips. Some things have changed, and some things are exactly where they're supposed to be. She hasn't changed at all. The morning's empty desk in class finally makes sense, but the news hits Yuichi like a physical weight. Sumi is out with a cold. While his mother frets over her condition, Yuichi is handed a single worksheet and a simple mission. He figures it'll be a quick handoff, just drop it in the mail slot and run. But his mom has other plans, and she's already dashing toward the kitchen to prep a supply run. 1,000 yen bill is slapped into his hand alongside a laundry list of sick day essentials. Vitamin jellies, sports drinks, the works. Yuichi tries to play it cool, arguing that it's just a common cold, but then the weight of her isolation drops like a stone in his stomach. Sumi lives alone. The image of his childhood friend shivering under the covers with no one to help her makes his casual protest die in his throat. Mom's voice is still ringing in his ears as he navigates the convenience store aisles. He stares at the shelf, paralyzed by choices he never had to make before. He doesn't actually know what kind of snacks she likes anymore. That's a detail lost to the years of silence. He settles for the safe stuff, the energy packs and sports drinks that scream medical necessity rather than personal gesture. He steps out of the store, the afternoon light stretching long and thin as he approaches her apartment complex. Apartment 302. Yuichi stands in the hallway, the bag of supplies suddenly feeling like it's filled with lead. He keeps telling himself she's just a childhood friend, but the sign on the door says something else. This is a girl's place. The air feels different here, quieter, more intimate. His heart starts a frantic rhythm against his ribs, a drumbeat of dun-dun-dun that he can't seem to silence. He presses the buzzer and waits. Silence stretches from seconds into minutes. His mind starts racing through worst-case scenarios. Did she collapse? Is she too weak to even reach the door? He pulls out his phone, a quick on-my-way message from her blinking on the screen. Just as the panic peaks, a heavy clack echoes from the other side. The door creaks open, and the sight of her stops his breath. Sumi is pale, her cheeks flushed with a sickly heat, and her eyes look glazed and heavy. She tries to offer a small mumble of thanks for coming, but her voice is thin and brittle. She looks terrible, worse than he imagined. He holds out the worksheet, his hands shaking slightly as he sees how much she's actually suffering. She barely has the strength to stand. As she turns back toward the apartment, her legs give out, and she staggers against the wall. She admits she used all her strength just getting to the door. Yuichi's protective instincts override his awkwardness. He tells her she shouldn't even be standing, let alone walking to her bedroom. She needs to be in bed right now. She looks up at him with those fever-bright eyes and delivers a line that feels like a prank. Piggyback ride? Yuichi stares at her, his brain short-circuiting. He can't tell if it's the fever talking or if she's actually serious. He blusters out a frantic, "Are you for real?" But her expression is soft, vulnerable, and completely sincere. She gives a tiny, feeble giggle, and the remaining walls around Yuichi's heart just crumble. The distance that haunted them for years, that yawning chasm of estrangement, feels suddenly, impossibly small today. He watches her sink down to the floor, her energy completely spent. He takes a breath, lets his shoulders drop, and gives in. Fine. He crouches down, his back to her, presenting his shoulders like a nervous novice. He fights to keep his voice steady as he reminds her that she can't walk anyway. She lingers for a second, her voice a soft, uncertain breath against the silence. "You don't mind?" He doesn't look back, just stares at the floor. "It's fine." She leans forward, her arms looping around his neck with a soft, trusting weight. It's been years, maybe a decade since they were in this position. The memories of their childhood come rushing back, but the physical reality of now is much more intense. As he prepares to lift her, the squish of her weight against his back makes every nerve ending in his body fire at once. His heart isn't just racing, it's attempting a jailbreak. The sensation of her soft, feverish body pressed against him is overwhelming. He's frozen, eyes wide and staring into the middle distance while his brain screams a single, repetitive thought. Ah, crap. He's a statue in the middle of her entryway. Sumi, barely conscious and leaning her head against his shoulder, wonders why they aren't moving yet. Her soft voice is a physical jolt to his system. He feels the heat rising in his own face, a blush that rivals her fever. She's so close that he can feel the heat of her breath against his neck. The world has narrowed down to the weight of her on his back and the deafening thump of his own pulse. She mumbles a tiny, self-conscious question. "Am I too heavy?" He can't even form words. His mind a chaotic static of "I don't know, I don't know, I don't know." He manages to croak out that she's not heavy at all, finally moving with the stiff, careful precision of someone carrying a crate of nitroglycerin. He gets her into bed, tucking her in as she lets out a relieved sigh. He's back in mission mode now, cracking open a sports drink and checking if she can drink it. Anything to distract from the fact that he was just carrying her. She thanks him, passing along a message for Momose-kun, a nickname that reminds him just how deep her ties to his family go. Sumi apologizes for being in her pajamas, but her voice is softer now, relaxed. She admits she figured since it was Yuichi, it was okay to see her like this. He realizes he was the only one getting worked up over nothing, and he lets out a long, shaky breath of relief. He sits by the bed for a moment, the quiet of the room making him fidget. He'd planned to just drop the stuff and bolt, but he couldn't just leave her when she was that weak. Now that she's settled, the nervousness returns. He tells her he's off and to get well soon, turning to head for the door. Then a sudden sharp tug stops him. Her fingers are curled around his sleeve. Wait. He turns back and sees her looking up with wide, pleading eyes. She looks like a different person under the influence of the fever. You can't leave. It hits him then, a memory long buried. When Sumi gets sick, she turns into a bit of a spoiled brat. The quiet, polite girl disappears, replaced by this desperate, clingy version of his childhood friend. She's saying things she'd never admit while healthy, begging him not to leave her alone. It's a scene straight out of their past, a dynamic he thought was gone forever. It feels overwhelmingly nostalgic, but there's a new, dangerous edge to the feeling that wasn't there when they were kids. He looks down at her, the feverish girl holding onto his shirt like it's a lifeline. It's the exact same situation they faced a dozen times as children, but this time, everything is different. His heart is pounding against his ribs, loud and undeniable. He can't blame it on the childhood memories anymore. Why is my heart racing? A glimpse of the past echoes in the present. 2 kids, a piggyback ride, and a friendship that was always meant to be this close. The air in this room is heavy with fever, and something else Momose can't quite name. Sumi is looking up at him with glazed, watery eyes, her fingers white-knuckled as she anchors herself to his sleeve. She doesn't look like the poised, distant girl from school anymore. She looks like the little girl who used to follow him everywhere. She lets out a shaky breath and whispers, "You-kun, don't leave me." Her voice cracks and Momose feels a physical jolt in his chest. This isn't just nostalgia. His heart is drumming a rhythm so loud it's practically vibrating against his ribs. He's spent years trying to get used to the distance between them, but this proximity is a total system failure. She lets out a pathetic little sniff, her face flushed a deep, worrying pink. It finally clicks for Yuichi. Fujino-san has zero chill when she's sick. Usually she's the picture of self-reliance, living alone and handling everything with a quiet grace, but the fever has stripped all that away. She's acting like a pampered kid who can't imagine doing a single thing for herself. He finds himself mesmerized by her, wondering where the usual Fujino went, only to realize that this messy, needy version of her is just as real. He doesn't really have a choice, does he? He sighs, giving in to the inevitable. Yeah, he mutters, confirming he'll stay. The reaction is instantaneous. She radiates a level of joy that's practically blinding, her whole face lighting up before she disappears under the safety of her duvet with a satisfied pomp. He's left standing there, wondering what he just signed up for. The room goes quiet, save for the soft sound of her breathing. Then, from beneath the sheets, a muffled mumble that cuts right through his defenses. I'm just so happy you're here. It's honest, unfiltered fever talk, and it sends his heart into another frantic femp. He's starting to think the fever might be contagious, because his face is definitely burning up too. Momose tries to be the voice of reason, asking how he's supposed to lock up if she's asleep. But Sumi has already solved the logistics of their sleepover. She gestures toward a spare key by the door, her movements clumsy and erratic. She's rolling around the bed like she's possessed by the spirit of a hyperactive toddler, completely ignoring the reality that she's supposed to be resting. She's definitely not fine, but she's definitely having a great time. She staggers, a blur of motion before finally collapsing back onto the pillow. Yuichi watches her, stuck between worry and a strange sense of relief that some things about her haven't changed at all. She was always like this when she got worked up. He looks at her peaceful, flushed face, and that nagging thump in his chest returns, demanding attention. A loud, unmistakable growl breaks the silence, and Sumi's face goes from sleepy to mortified in 3 seconds flat. Yuichi pulls the secret weapon out of his bag, a slice of strawberry shortcake. Her eyes lock onto the plastic container like a heat-seeking missile. Cake, she gasps, her schoolgirl composure completely dissolving. He bought it knowing it was her favorite, but seeing her reaction, he realizes he might have underestimated just how much of a grip sugar has on her. He caught her off guard. She's blushing, wondering how on earth he remembered. It's simple, really. He just remembers 2 kids sitting side by side, obsessed with a picture book called The Giant Bakery. She used to stare at the pages like they were holy scripture. He figured anyone who looks at a drawing of a cake with that much intensity probably still carries that torch 10 years later. For a second, the years of silence between them vanish. In her mind, those cakes weren't just food, they were a symbol of everything she wanted. They were more something I longed for, she admits, her voice soft and vulnerable. Yuichi can only stare, caught in the gravity of her gaze. Longed, in what way? He wonders. But the answer feels too big for a sick room at night. She pulls the fork back, but she isn't taking a bite. Instead, she holds the prize of the entire cake, the strawberry, out toward him. Her smile is shy, her cheeks glowing. I'm giving it to you because it's the best part. It's the ultimate gesture of childhood friendship, but between 2 teenagers in a dimly lit bedroom. It feels like an explosive charge is about to go off. She leans in, her eyes searching his, making it impossible to look away. Thank you for today. It's really comforting that you're here. The air is thick enough to choke on. She's not just offering him fruit, she's offering a piece of her heart, and she's doing it with a smile that could melt glaciers. He's paralyzed, his brain short-circuiting as he realizes she's waiting for him to open his mouth. Panic hits him like a freight train. Is she going to feed me? His hands fly up, reflexively trying to stop the madness. I can do it myself, he stammers, but his voice is an octave too high. He's staring at that strawberry like it's a live grenade, and his own heart is beating so fast he's worried it might actually burst. Sumi isn't having it. She puffed her cheeks out, a firm nope, ringing through the room. She's locked in, stubborn as a mule, and she isn't backing down until he eats that strawberry. Yuichi realizes he's lost. He's deadlocked with a sick girl who is channeling the energy of a spoiled brat, and the only way out is through. Fine, whatever, he thinks, surrendering to the absolute chaos of the moment. He takes the bite, and for a second, the world just stops. His face is a violent shade of red, and he can't even look at her. But she's beaming, her eyes crinkling with pure, unadulterated satisfaction. "I'm gonna eat now too," she chirps, completely oblivious to the fact that she just nearly ended him. He sits there, staring at the floor, wondering if he'll ever be able to look at a strawberry the same way again. Just like that, the energy drains out of her. One minute she's eating cake, and the next she's drifting off to sleep like a baby. "Are you a baby?" Yuichi whispers to the empty room, but she's already out. He tucks her in, grabs his things, and heads out into the cool night air. It isn't until he's halfway home that he feels the weight in his pocket and freezes. What should I do about her key? The morning sun is way too bright for the level of stress Yuichi is carrying. He's sitting at his desk, sweating over the piece of metal in his pocket, and rehearsing how to hand it back without making it weird. Then, a shadow falls over his desk. "Good morning." He looks up and there she is. Fujino Sumi, back in her uniform, looking as cool and composed as ever. The rowdy kid from last night is gone, replaced by the school's unreachable idol. The interaction is painfully polite. She thanks him, asks him to thank his mother, and moves on like they're just two acquaintances. Yuichi's head is spinning. What a difference, he screams internally. Last night she was clinging to his arm and feeding him strawberries, and today she's acting like they're barely on a first-name basis. This is the norm, the ordinary routine they've built, but it comes across as a bad joke after everything that happened. But the cool facade is just a lie. Behind her book, Sumi's face is glowing like a neon sign, her heart hammering against her ribs just as hard as his. She's terrified she's acting weird, while Yuichi is currently having a localized panic attack. He suddenly remembers the most important thing he forgot to do. Oh, I never gave back her key. He's still got the literal key to her life in his pocket, and the thought of handing it back just became 10 times more impossible. Yuichi's hand is shaking so hard he can practically hear the house key rattling against his palm. He spent the whole school day acting like a stranger to Sumi, and now he's haunting her hallway like a low-rent cat burglar. He needs a clean exit, a way to sever this tether of responsibility without another heart-shredding eye contact incident. His brain finally sparks a desperate plan. I can just put it in her mail slot. It's perfect. It's simple. It's the coward's way out, and he is leaning into it with everything he's got. Just as he's about to rid himself of the evidence, the universe decides to play a prank. A familiar, breezy voice cuts through his panic, and the hilarious that follows is like a death knell for his privacy. Shiratori Erika is currently squatting right next to him, watching his localized meltdown with the glee of a tabloid reporter who just found a gold mine. His first instinct is to bolt, a literal sprint for freedom, but he's already been tagged. He doesn't even make it 3 steps before he feels the collar of his shirt snap tight. Erika yanks him back with effortless strength, her eyes gleaming with a terrifying level of interest. This is Shiratori Erika, precisely the brand of high-energy chaos agent Yuichi usually avoids at all costs, and she just spotted the literal key to the school idol's apartment in his hand. She leans in, a shark-like grin spreading across her face. "Why did you have her key?" Yuichi is cornered, and Erika knows it. She's not just looking for an answer, she's looking for a bribe. Her finger goes to her lip, her expression shifting from predatory to deceptively sweet as she floats the idea of a parfait. The social hierarchy of the hallway just shifted, and Yuichi is currently at the bottom of the bill. "Why don't you tell Oleg-shun?" she asks, practically vibrating with the power of the secret she's holding over him. The cost of silence is exactly 1 strawberry-loaded mountain of sugar. Yuichi watches his monthly allowance evaporate into Erika's digestive system as she beams at the towering parfait. He's sitting there like a man facing a firing squad, while she's treating this like a celebratory feast. The gossip atmosphere is thick enough to choke on, and Erika finally stops admiring the fruit long enough to deliver the ultimatum. So, spill. Between bites of cream, Erika drops a name that sounds like a glitch in the Matrix, Nana Nana. It's a relic from elementary school, a goofy childhood pact that Yuichi hasn't thought about in years. But as he looks at her, the playful smirk on her face starts to bridge the gap between the loud girl across from him and the kid she used to be. It's a name that carries the weight of a friendship that never really died, even if it got a little dusty. Back then, they were a quartet. A messy group of 4 linked by a name born from Japanese wordplay and too much free time. Sumi, Erika, Yuichi, and one more. Looking at the old photos, the contrast is stinging. They were inseparable, a tiny tribe that didn't care about school reputations or social distance. We were good friends in elementary school, but Yuichi trails off, the butt hanging in the air like a heavy curtain between the past and the present. Erika isn't blind to the irony. She's swapped the glasses and the quiet demeanor for something much louder, but she looks at Yuichi and sees the same reliable kid she's always known. People change, she admits, but her eyes are fixed on him with a knowing glint. She's done waiting for him to find his words. She wants the raw truth of how that key ended up in his pocket, and she wants it now. Yuichi attempts to make it sound clinical. He tells her about the collapse, the walk home, and the bed, but in his head, he's still feeling the heat of Sumi's hand on his arm. Erika's reaction? Pure, unadulterated disappointment. She was expecting a scandal, a dramatic confession, or at least a kiss. Instead, she gets a story about a guy being responsible and locking the door on his way out. She lets out a groan that could be heard 3 blocks away. Boo-oring. But as the comedy fades, Erika's expression shifts. She's looking at the math Yuichi isn't doing. For Sumi, the girl who builds walls like a fortress to just fall asleep while a guy is in her room. That isn't just exhaustion, it's a complete abandonment of her defenses. Erika spells it out for him, her voice losing its teasing edge for just a second. A guy comes over and she just falls asleep and leaves herself defenseless? The weight of that thought settles in the booth. Erika rests her chin on her hand, her gaze softening. She must really trust you. It's a simple observation that feels like a heavy weight on Yuichi's chest. He tries to brush it off, to claim she was just spacey, but he knows better. He remembers her smile from back then, the one that hasn't changed even if everything else has. They're standing on the edge of something, and the silence between them is starting to feel like an answer. Yuichi ducks behind his water glass, his ears glowing a tactical shade of crimson. He's thinking about lots of things, mostly Sumi's face, and Erika is smelling blood in the water again. Her eyes turn into literal stars as she vibrates in her seat, demanding a front row seat to any future developments. If anything else happens with Sumi, you have to tell me, she chirps. The chaotic shipper inside her fully awakened. As they leave the cafe, the air turns a bit more honest. Erika admits she was worried he'd grown to dislike her, that the distance between them wasn't just time, but a lack of caring. Yuichi's protest is immediate and sincere. He isn't the kind of guy to throw away a childhood bond, even if he is the kind of guy who gets weirdly formal as he gets older. Erika seizes the opening, demanding he drop the Shiratori-san stuff. If they're still friends, she wants to hear it. She tests him with Erika-sama, laughing as he blanches, but then she lands on the one that matters. Eken. When he finally says it, her reaction is like a light bulb clicking on. It's a small surrender, a return to the easy rhythm of Nana Nana. And the smile she gives him isn't a tease, it's the look of someone who just got a piece of her childhood back. Erika is back in top form, throwing a thumbs up and declaring they're group best friends for life. Yuichi can only stare, blinded by the sheer, unadulterated shininess of her enthusiasm. He calls her out for being out of date, but she doesn't care. She's the current thing, and she's deciding that their history is very much alive. She's already planning the reunion, dragging the past into the present, whether Yuichi is ready or not. Just as he's getting used to the pace, Erika has a localized panic moment of her own. She's late for work. 1 second she's beaming at him, and the next she's a blur of hair and school bag disappearing down the street. Yuichi is left standing in the wake of the tornado she just unleashed, wondering how he managed to survive the last hour without his brain leaking out of his ears. He walks the rest of the way home in a daze, wondering why calling Erika Akon felt so simple while calling Sumi anything but her family name carries the weight of a life-or-death challenge. But the quiet reflection doesn't last. As soon as he hits the gate, he's hit by a different kind of tornado. Chihiro is practically glowing with excitement, vibrating with a beam of energy that usually means trouble for Yuichi's peaceful evening. Chihiro delivers the knockout blow with a grin that takes up half her face. We're gonna spend the night at Sumi-chan's house. The air leaves Yuichi's lungs in a rush. He spent all day trying to give back the key, trying to distance himself from the intimacy of her home, and now his family is moving in for the night. The what-at that rips out of him echoes through the neighborhood, a perfect symphony of shock and impending domestic disaster. While Chihiro is busy being super hyped and packing her bag, Yuichi is already mourning his sanity. He's standing there watching the gears of his life turn into a sleepover he never signed up for. The distance he's been trying so hard to maintain just vanished, replaced by a backpack and a very determined little sister. It seems the Nana reunion is happening, whether he's ready or not, starting with his sister invading the very space he just barely managed to escape. Yuichi is currently questioning every life choice that led him to this doorstep. Behind him, Chihiro is practically vibrating with enough energy to power a small city, screaming about staying at Sumi-chan's like it's a national holiday. He reaches out, a finger trembling over the buzzer. Ding dong. The lock clicks. It's the sound of the point of no return. His heart is hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs, a desperate thump-thump that drowns out the quiet hallway. Is this actually happening? Is he really about to cross the threshold into her private world? Then, there she is. Sumi stands in the doorway, soft and domestic in an oversized cardigan, looking like a dream Yuichi isn't quite prepared for. Chihiro immediately launches into super sparkling mode at the sight of her idol. Sumi offers a small, welcoming tilt of her head. Momose-kun, Chihiro-chan, welcome. The apartment is warm, smelling faintly of tea and something sweet. While Chihiro treats the living room like a jungle gym, Yuichi is stiff as a board, barely managing a thanks as he tries not to stare at how comfortable Sumi looks in her own space. Back when they were little, these sleepovers were the peak of their existence, a chaotic blur of games and sugar. Now, with Chihiro demanding to know what's for dinner and what games they're playing, that old energy is crashing back into the room. Yuichi just wants to survive the next 10 minutes without short-circuiting. Sumi presents her secret weapon, a brand new takoyaki grill, still gleaming. She admits she's never actually used it before, but the intent is clear. Yuichi watches her, realization sinking in. She lives alone. She bought this whole setup just for them. I thought we could have takoyaki. She looks at the grill like it's a sacred artifact she's determined to master. Chihiro is already chanting for a papa potty, while Sumi bashfully explains she just wanted to try it out. Yuichi offers a quiet thanks, feeling that familiar tug in his chest at how hard she's trying to make this special. Then she brings out the supplies. It's not just takoyaki, it's a culinary fever dream. Fish, kimchi, chocolate, gummy candy, and something called death sauce. Yuichi stares at the table, wondering if they're having a dinner or an endurance test. It's so much stuff, the table is practically groaning under the weight. She's clutching armfuls of bags like a squirrel preparing for a nuclear winter. When she offers to run out for more if it's not enough, Yuichi has to step in before she buys out the entire district. It's clear to everyone except Sumi herself. She has been looking forward to this more than anyone. Oh no, there's plenty. Sumi ducks her head, hiding a blush behind her hands, as she realizes she might have gone a bit overboard. In the silence, Yuichi sees the truth of it. The years of distance have left her just as desperate for this connection as he is. She isn't just making dinner, she's trying to fill up all that lost time with a mountain of ingredients. He remembers seeing her earlier, lugging a bag so heavy it looked like it was packed for a month-long expedition. Now he knows why. Every inch of that pack was stuffed with things to share, a physical manifestation of her hope that this night would never end. Her eyes are wide and earnest, reflecting a vulnerability that hits Yuichi harder than any physical blow. She isn't overdoing it because she's clumsy, she's doing it because she values the proximity. Because we can spend a lot of time together, I brought a whole lot of stuff. He's always known this about her. Since they were kids, whenever Sumi looked forward to something, she'd pour every ounce of her focus into the preparation. It was her way of saying this matters without ever having to speak the words. Chihiro just sees a cute sister figure to hug, but Yuichi sees the girl who never stopped caring. The heavy atmosphere is broken by his sister asking why he's being so quiet. He brushes it off, trying to suppress the nervous jitters that still plague him. They haven't done this in ages, and how much he's missed that presence is still settling in his stomach. All right, he announces, ready to distract himself with cooking. The kitchen turns into a battlefield. Sumi is focused on the batter, Yuichi is on prep duty, and Chihiro is a loose cannon eyeing the death sauce with dangerous curiosity. He has to practically tackle her to keep the dinner edible, while Sumi just watches them with a quiet, amused smile. Disaster is narrowly averted when Chihiro tries to mix Mentos and soda right there in the heart of the living room. Finally, the chaos subsides as the first round of takoyaki starts to golden. The scent of basil and cheese fills the air, and for a moment the tension between Yuichi and Sumi feels less like anxiety and more like genuine warmth. The takoyaki are perfect, golden, crispy, and piping hot. Chihiro is the first to dive in, her face lighting up as she practically inhales the food. Even Yuichi has to admit, they came out great, round, hot, yummy. Chihiro cheers, her joy infectious enough to make Yuichi finally relax his shoulders. Seeing Sumi and Chihiro laughing together over the steam of the grill, Yuichi feels a rare sense of peace. He was so worried about how awkward this would be, but right now, it just feels right. He tells himself he was stressing over nothing, a thought that usually precedes a total disaster in his life. With the plates cleared, the sleepover energy shifts to its final, most dangerous phase. Chihiro, lacking any and all filters, decides it's time for games, and then the knockout blow suggests they all take a bath together. Yuichi freezes, the takoyaki in his stomach turning into a block of lead. His heart starts doing that frantic thump-thump thing again, but this time it's in double time. The sheer logistics of using her bath make his brain want to exit through his ears. He scrambles for an excuse, insisting he'll just run home to use his own shower since it's close. It's a desperate tactical retreat. Sumi tilts her head, her expression one of pure, devastating confusion. She doesn't see the problem, she only sees a friend trying to leave the party early. She delivers the question that finally shatters what's left of his sanity. Why? Can't you just take a bath here? Yuichi's internal processor just hit a blue screen. The bath time panic hasn't even settled before Chihiro pivots the entire room's energy with a single high-voltage smile. She's already got the console out and a mission in mind: game night. Yuichi is still caught in a logic loop. The logistics of Sumi's bathroom are currently living rent-free in his head, but the physical reality of a controller being shoved into his hands forces a system reboot. His brain is a runaway train of what-ifs and domestic scenarios that have no business being this loud. He squeezes his eyes shut, trying to purge the imagery of the bath before he actually short-circuits. He finally just tosses the controller to the side, a frantic internal plea of stop, thinking, echoing through the quiet void of his own mind. They load up Exit 10, one of those spot the anomaly horror games where the silence is the loudest thing in the room. Suddenly, the couch feels a lot smaller as Chihiro and Sumi instinctively press into his back. Yuichi is supposed to be the brave protagonist here, but his heart is currently doing a drum solo against his ribs while he struggles to make sense of the sudden, warm weight of Sumi clinging to his shoulder. Chihiro is vibrating like a smartphone on silent, claiming she's just so curious, despite the fact that she's clearly terrified. She tries to play it off as cool excitement, but the frantic tremble emanating from her says otherwise. Yuichi just stares at the screen, wondering how he ended up as the literal human shield for two girls who are currently losing their minds over a digital hallway. Then comes the handoff. Chihiro bails, thrusting the controller towards Sumi like it's a live grenade. Sumi freezes, her usual composure melting into a look of genuine wide-eyed dread. She's built a reputation as the cool, collected childhood friend, but as she looks at the controller, that facade is starting to crack. Yuichi watches her, the memories of her childhood terror coming back in vivid detail. She's never been good with the supernatural, but she's trying so hard to be the brave adult tonight. She clutches the controller, her knuckles white, and delivers her final stand. But I feel like I can do it. Then, with a tactical zoop, she scoots just an inch closer to him, looking for a safety net she won't admit she needs. Chihiro is the ultimate hype man, practically glowing with the thrill of the hunt. Sumi catches that energy, her own face lighting up with a determined beam as she convinces herself that watching YouTube videos of this game makes her an expert. They huddle around the table, a tiny fortress of three against the digital dark, ready to rip the band-aid off and face whatever's waiting behind the next corner. And then the hallway screams. A pale, pixelated nightmare sprints around the corner, and the room explodes into pure, unadulterated chaos. Chihiro is shrieking, Sumi is gasping, and Yuichi is just trying to keep the console from flying across the room as his vision is suddenly obscured by flailing limbs in panic. Sumi's brain has officially exited the chat. She's staring at the screen with eyes like dinner plates, her soul practically hovering outside her body in a cartoonish bubble of shock. She doesn't even think, she just lunges. Her hands find Yuichi's arm and lock on like a vice. Her voice a tiny trembling whisper. Momose-kun. The terror of the game is gone, replaced by a much more immediate physical heart attack. Sumi is looking up at him through tear-filled eyes, her cheeks burning a deep, secondary embarrassment red. The air in the room just got 5 times heavier as she squeezes his arm and asks, "Is it okay if I hold you?" Yuichi's internal monologue just flatlined. He barely gets a shore out before Chihiro decides she's not being left out of the protective circle, diving in for a Me Too hug. It's a ridiculous high-stakes sandwich of childhood friends and adrenaline. Yuichi is currently trapped between a terrifying zombie and the most intimate proximity of his life, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm that has absolutely nothing to do with the video game. The credits roll, and the tension snaps like a rubber band. They survived. Chihiro is already back to her high-energy self, pumping her fists and claiming that was the best time ever, while Yuichi just takes a long, shaky breath. It's over. The monsters are gone, but the girls are still very much attached to his sides. Chihiro hits her limit, declaring she's been holding it in the whole time, and bolts for the bathroom with a frantic "be right back." Suddenly, the room is quiet, too quiet. Sumi is still there, huddled against Yuichi's chest, her head tucked under his chin. He makes a half-hearted attempt to remind her the game is over, but she hasn't moved an inch. She looks like she's seen a ghost and lived to regret it. When she finally speaks, it's a tragic muffled sob into her own hands. "I'm never going to the bathroom again." She makes it sound like she's suffered some great, unspeakable trauma, leaving Yuichi to awkwardly offer a bathroom escort just to get her to stop trembling. The air between them is thick, a heavy blanket of silence that makes every shallow breath feel like an intrusion. Yuichi can feel the heat radiating off her, the softness of her hair against his cheek. He's counting the seconds, wondering how long they can stay like this before the world, or Chihiro comes crashing back in. Then she says it, a truth so simple it cuts right through his panic. "I feel safe when I'm close to you." It's an echo from a decade ago, a memory of a boy in a cape and a girl under a blanket. She's not just scared of a game, she's leaning on a promise he made before they even knew what the world could do to them. Yuichi, desperate to stop his heart from leaping out of his chest, decides to deploy a tactical tease. He asks her if she's still afraid of green peas, and the romantic tension instantly shifts into a pout. Sumi's cheeks puff out in an angry look as he starts listing off all her old childhood phobias: bugs, eggplant, thunder, watching her composure crumble as he digs up every detail from the past. She looks at him, truly frustrated now, her voice a mix of embarrassment and genuine wonder. "Why do you remember all of this?" It's the ultimate tell. He's been paying attention for years, even when they weren't speaking. But before the conversation can get any deeper, Chihiro bursts back into the room, her voice booming like a foghorn. "Bath time, Sumi-chan, let's go." The memory pulls him back to a pitch-black room and a makeshift fort, a younger Yuichi reaching out, his small hand finding hers in the dark. He promised her then that it didn't matter if there was thunder or ghosts or total darkness. As long as they were together, they'd be fine. He can still hear his own high-pitched, confident voice echoing across the years. "I'll protect you." Seeing her now, walking away with Chihiro, he realizes he's still keeping that promise, even if he's doing it through gritted teeth and red ears. He just desperately hopes she doesn't remember that specific, embarrassing line. Down to the very last detail, even that ridiculous smile carrot shirt, the past is currently sitting right in the middle of his present.